You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is August 29th, 2024. It's 7:35 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And tonight, what I thought I would talk about is exploration. And mainly the question that comes up for people is, what or how do I learn to explore if I didn't learn to explore when I was younger? Or if I learn to explore, but my exploration is mostly focused on secondary exploration. So it's probably important to define the terms of primary and secondary exploration. Primary exploration is the exploration you do because it provides a sense of meaningfulness in life. And so we might also talk about that as the activation of the creative self. We can talk about how the creative self gets inhibited and prevented from arising. On the one hand, you have the barrier of fear of engaging in things. And then on the other end, you have the denial of death, which creates this sense that time is unlimited and we don't have to solve it now. And then depending on what your attachment conditioning is like, your relationship to exploration will be quite different. Secondary exploration is, of course, the pursuit of time, energy, and resources that would then allow you to support your life and then also allow you to create the opportunities for meaningful exploration. Secondary exploration, really, since it's so focused on resources for survival, it often takes the form of not having a lot of meaning potential to it. In our society, in our culture, some things are remunerated at a fantastic level, and a lot of things are not remunerated so well. And there's not a correlation between remuneration and meaning necessarily, so that you could be engaged in a secondary exploration that provides an ample amount of resources that you might use to engage in meaningful exploration, but because of the demands of the secondary explorations, you don't have the personal resources to be able to engage in that. So you have energy which you can use to explore with, and you have to have that energy available to engage in the explorations that provide meaning. And if so much of that energy is consumed by the secondary exploration, it often leaves you in a position where you can't do the primary exploration. It's easy to get out of balance. And the way our culture is set up, and this, I think, is probably less true in Europe, and I'm actually not so sure about how it is in other cultures, but if the remuneration for the activities that you are able to engage in to provide the resources for your life are so poorly funded that it's very easy to get into a place where all of your energy is consumed just in the basic survival mode. This is in the US in particular because of the inequality and the way that the tax system is set up that really just funnels the money up the chain rather than distributing it. If you're lower down on the economic ladder, your time, energy, and resources are consumed just in gathering the basics. And I would guess even half of the country is in a position of some scarcity in that. This is a decision that we have made as a culture to do this. It's quite intentional, and it could be undone if we had the political will to do it. We just don't seem to come up with it. Um, but let's talk a little bit about where the origin of the capacities to explore come from. When you're born, of course, you don't have language. You don't have uh, organizations around communication. You're entirely dependent on the care that you receive, and the way that you understand yourself and the way that you develop the working model of yourself comes from the reflections of the caregivers toward you. And it starts really early, right away. And, there's studies that show that the first gesture that infants make for attachment connection happens around 42 minutes of life. So it takes that long to organize coming out of the birth experience. And then there's a reflexive smile that's generated by things that move in the visual field of the infant, and that calling out for attention and care. In the way that we talk about this, we all basically start out as autoregulators. We're very self-oriented, very insular because of that birth experience of coming into life inside the mother's womb. And then when we're expelled from the mother's womb, expelled from the Garden of Eden, if you will, and we're that infant that is engaged in the world, we call out and the world responds. Uh, but in the beginning, in that first few months of life, we're really oriented around ourselves. We have a hard time telling whether there's something else in the environment. And we regulate ourselves as an experience. If somebody comes reliably enough that we begin to recognize that they come and it's helpful to us, we reorient toward an external source of regulation of our experience. And then if that person comes reliably enough, we enter into a collaborative relationship with them where we express ourselves, they understand, they're sensitively enough attuned to us that they can understand what's happening. And then they respond to us by taking care of us in the way that we need. And we understand that loop as I make the authentic expression in of my needs, and then somebody understands what I'm trying to express, and then they respond by taking care of me. So I have the experience of being effective in the world, that the world recognizes me and responds to me. And it begins to create this expectation that if I express myself authentically, the world will respond in a way that meets my needs. And that's that cycle of security. The caregiver sensitively enough attunes, empathetically connects, understands the expression of the child, and they mirror that back to the child. And we begin to understand the nature of the world in that reflection. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm feeling angry. And the caregiver reflects that back and informs us what that is. And then as we develop in through the different stages in the first year till we're actually operating an attachment system at about 10 months, and then actually standing on two legs at about a year, and beginning to move into the exploration of the environment that we're in. That support from the caregiver, that emotional regulation that comes from the caregiver, is the thing that allows us to begin to venture out. So when we're still in the blob stage, right? The caregiver puts us down and maybe we can roll over, but that's as far as we can get. And then we sort of creep along, which is sliding ourselves along. Maybe we can get 3 feet, and then we get up on all fours and we're crawling. And that's when this process of the support for our exploration really begins. The child crawls away from the caregiver and ratchets around looking at the caregiver for the reassurance that they can keep going. And if the caregiver reassures them, they go further. And then they'll get to the doorway and they'll crawl out the doorway and crawl right back in because they don't really have what we call object constancy. They don't know that we're going to be there when they come back. And the more reliable we are and the more reassuring we are, the more emotionally regulating we are for them, the further that they can go until they can really explore the whole house and then maybe even get out into the backyard, or if there is one, or go to the park. And it's always this going out and exploring and coming rushing back to the secure base that will then help them come back into emotional regulation. And the other piece that's so essential to this is the interest and delight in the things that we discover about the world and the opportunity to express it to them as fully as we need to, so that we feel really seen in our exploration, really valued in our exploration, and that our exploration has an effect on somebody else. And then as we develop, what we also need from a caregiver is them recognizing our capacities and moving the goalpost of exploration out over and over again, and not so far out that we can't do it, but a little bit of a stretch in the range of what we can do, so that when we go out and explore something, we're going right up to the edge of our capacity and succeeding. It's very defeating for a child to have the goalpost move beyond what they can do and strive for the goal and not be able to reach it. But it's very reinforcing, very encouraging for the child to have the goal set within what they can manage, but a stretch so that they can get to it and feel the accomplishment of getting to it, and then coming back over and over again to express what they found out. And this is one of the great challenges of parenting. I remember teaching. I mean, I didn't intend to teach the child to somersault, but it happened in just in the play, and they were small. I wonder how old, 3 or 4, something like that. But once they did the somersault once, they wanted to do it again. And once they did it again, they wanted to do it again. And once they did it again, they wanted to do it again and again and again and again. It was so thrilling to be engaged in something new. And then can you, as the adult that's in relationship to the child, go again and delight, and go again and delight, and go 40 times, and still on the 41st time express a sense of delight in the discovery that the child has of how they can move their body through space. I remember another friend's child would kneel on my legs. He would come right into my face, maybe a half a foot away, and stare into my eyes until he started to laugh. And then he would roll back and break the attunement, and then he would strike me in the chest with his head as he was laughing. And then when he settled, he would come back and do it again. 20 or 30 times or 40 times he would do this. And could you in each time light up with a sense of delight in the discovery of this? Of course, that exercise was in a discovery around attunement and how emotionally dysregulated it is to get close to somebody, and how you can break the attunement and come back and regulate it, then reattune. These kinds of exercises for children are really important because it helps them learn to regulate their emotions while they're engaged in the process of exploration. And the better they get at regulating their emotions in exploration, the bigger risks that they can take in exploration. And the poorer you are at regulating your emotions in exploration, the more limited you are in taking the kinds of risks that you need to find out the things that you know. And while the child level of exploration is one thing, the adult level of exploration to really go for something that's hard to do and hard to find out, hard to understand, means that you have to have a pretty brilliant capacity to regulate your own emotions, or you won't be able to do it. And so when we talk about the things that happen to children that then carry out into the adult life, this is one of them. You don't really have the capacity to emotionally regulate yourself when you're taking big risks. So that's something that needs to be developed. But let's look at this process again. If we all started auto-regulators and to move into externally regulating and develop further, we need a reliable caregiver that comes over and over again. So we shift out of auto-regulating into external regulating. But what happens if nobody comes reliably? Nobody helps regulate. Then we really stay in this place of auto-regulating. This makes us quite susceptible to substance and process addictions later in life because we don't develop the skill set to emotionally regulate with other people or to rely on other people to help us regulate. In fact, because nobody came, we don't really even have the concept half the time that this is something that can be done. In environments where people don't come reliably and attend with interest to the needs of the child then needs to learn to adapt to a system where they need to attend to the needs of the parent. And in children who stay in the auto-regulating system, what they learn is a system of idealization where they present themselves to their caregivers in a way that the caregiver wishes to see them. Typically includes stripping out anything that is negative. But what it also tends to do is to suppress the expression of primary exploration needs. Because we often, as children, because we're unique, find things about the world that are fascinating, that are different from what our caregiver thinks or finds interesting. And if we don't have a sensitively enough attuned caregiver that then finds what we find interesting meaningful, they don't support it. And so what you often find also in people that are primarily auto-regulators is that they learn not to express their primary exploration needs because the experience of them being rejected and sometimes even shamed by the caregivers. And so that's a secret which is unshareable for most avoidant people. But what they get good at is providing secondary exploration. They get good at providing of pursuing time, energy, and resources because they have to present themselves in a way that the caregiver wants them to in order to get taken care of. They learn a very transactional relationship. I do this for you, and then you do that for me. It's not collaborative in that sense. And because they need to gather resources in order to trade for the care that they want, it isn't that they don't get their needs met, it's that they don't learn to collaborate with somebody to get their needs met. And because they learn a transactional system, they get good at pursuing things that have uh, value. In the beginning, of course, it's that have value to the caregivers, what matters to them. But because they see if you can gather the things that matter to other people, you can trade for care. They, when they turn toward the outside world, they see things that matter to people, and then they go after them. Udit?
Which, yeah, I understand this in the concept of adults where I want to look good, I want to make money so that the society appreciates me more. But I don't understand
Right.
in the context of kids, what exactly are they doing to idolize themselves?
Well, it depends on what is has high social value in the environment that they grow up in. They
So,
really are really, kids. They look around and see what gets attention, what doesn't get attention, what has value, that what produces interest in other people, and then they begin to pursue that.
in other people or just the caregiver?
Uh, well, once you move, a child at, say, in our culture, 4 or 5 begins to move outside of the direct sphere of the family system. If you're allowed to go to school or uh, preschool daycare, then you're moving into an environment which has a different social hierarchy, which kids are very sensitive to. I can give you an example of that, which I thought was hilarious. Uh, when we used to do retreats up at Second Circle, people were welcome to bring their children if they wanted to. And on one particular retreat, uh, a little girl came. I think she was 4 years old, and after about 5 days at the retreat, as we were sitting down to do the morning meditation and then begin the class, the Dharma talk and instructions for the day, she came up to me with a drawing of everybody sitting in the meditation hall, which was really beautiful. And she gave me an acorn. And then she went over to the retreat manager and gave the retreat manager an acorn. And she didn't give anyone else an acorn. So that she was able, after 4 or 5 days of the retreat, to recognize that I was the retreat leader and the retreat manager was the other person who had power. And so she was introducing herself to the two of us. Uh, Kids really can see all of that happening and really respond to that.
This is idolization.
What?
This is idolization. I thought this is respect.
It's recognizing social status and then uh, putting yourself in the sphere of people who have high social status.
Putting yourself in, is that what he said?
Well, she was 4,
Right.
and a 4-year-old was able to recognize who the two people who had the most social status
Right.
in terms of running the retreat, and was able to introduce herself to both of them with a gift at 4 years old. I mean, this is part of the human condition.
I was just wondering what the behavior looks like for a kid. What does he do? What does he say? If he or she is showing some idolization, how do you find out? How do you know?
Usually the report is the kid is very well behaved and always does whatever they're asked to do. So my child is no problem. I tell them to go play and they go play. They're polite. If the family requires politeness, but if the family requires a kid that yells, then the kid is yelling. It really is what the family system needs from the child. What did your caregivers need from you? And if you were in that situation of uh, you your authentic needs being neglected and the needs of the parents being superseded over them. What is it that you had to do in order to stay in their good graces? Which does not necessarily mean you had to excel. You could actually needed to fail, and you would have done that as well, depending on what they demanded of you.
Yeah, I guess mine was also politeness and just quiet, shy. Yeah, I think my fear was also a big piece, so it kind of like just numbs everything up. But it's hard to know because most of the kids these days, I'm thinking of my nephews, you train the kid to do so many things. He learns the piano, he goes to football, he goes to school, gets good grades. It's hard to know really when this is happening. So I was just wondering if there's like signs of behavior or like the, but just doing excelling at everything is a sign.
Right. Um, so an example might be, I don't care what you do. You should do the things that really you find enjoyable and interesting, and you don't have to be the best, but you have to do your best. Right? Is that making sense?
Mm.
That all the science says that you need to play a musical instrument when you're a child to develop the capacity for higher thinking. So you have to play an instrument because that's the developmental challenge that's appropriate for childhood. But I don't care what instrument you play the one that you want to play. And you don't have to be the first chair of the orchestra or the band, but you have to play it as best you can, if that makes sense. So that what the child experiences in that environment is their interests are primary and their capacities are what matter. And they're being encouraged to be excellent, not in comparison with the status that the parent is seeking, but what they're good at and what represents them being accomplished so that they have the experience of being accomplished at something that they like, that matters to them. You have to be first chair and you can't do it. That's completely defeating for a child, not something that encourages them to really go explore. That has the opposite effect. The people that are most challenged in exploration are preoccupied people of the organized side. The disorganized side is a little different, and the reason that preoccupied kids are have such a hard time is because they're prevented from exploring by the caregivers because the caregivers' needs trump the child's need to explore. And often this has to do with, because we're likely to have the same attachment strategy as our caregiver. If you grow up to be preoccupied, it's likely that your primary caregiver was also preoccupied. Preoccupied people like physical proximity, constant physical proximity, because they use that for regulating. And so if the child becomes the caregiver's regulator, then the caregiver doesn't like to be separated from the child. So particularly in that early period, before the child enters into the school system, the caregiver often interferes with the process of the child being able to explore. And a rule of thumb, of course, with small kids is when they want to be picked up, you pick them up. And When they want to be put down, you put them down. And so what can often happen, and I was at a gathering, and there were a lot of kids around, and a child, 3 or 4, ran up to his grandmother, and the grandmother scooped him up, but he clearly resisted being scooped up. That wasn't what he wanted. And then she sat him on his lap and she wrapped him up in his arms. And when he wanted to be put down, she wouldn't put him down. And he struggled and struggled. And she overwhelmed him with the strength that she had in relationship to his until he stopped struggling and sat there. But that was so clearly an indication of her interfering with his desire to be put down so he could return to exploration to meet her need for closeness with the grandchild. And all of the protestations of the grandchild were simply ignored and overwhelmed forcefully so that the grandmother could have what she wanted. And those kinds of inhibitions over and over again in childhood, or kind of overprotection that comes, prevents the child then from having the emotional regulation that they need to begin that foray out into the world around them. And then they look toward the relationship, that closeness, to be compensatory for the need to explore. And it isn't. And so there's a kind of despair about that. Disorganized people often are, that natural desire to explore is also the mechanism which is used to exploit them. They're encouraged to explore and then directed to explore things that actually, in the end, are satisfying to the perpetrator, but very damaging to the child. So you have the frame of what happens, what might have happened. And now let's flip it over to here we are as adults with our conditioning, our attachment conditioning, all intact, looking to solve the dilemma of a life that isn't rich enough in meaning, that we aren't in a state of dissatisfaction, even to the point of despair at the way that our life is. And so what we need to do is to begin to explore something, but engage in the activity mainly around the evaluation of whether or not the engaging in the activity and the process of doing it is meaningful in and of itself. That the time spent engaged in the activity provides a sense of meaningfulness. Now, I wish that there was one simple definition of what's meaningful, but because we are unique in our humanness, unique in our conditioning, the solution to each of these is so specific to the unique person that you are, that part of what this discovery process is finding that out. But what is general and the main part of this that is important to understand is that if the attachment system is activated, the exploration system is off. So the first thing we're really looking at is, can I feel emotionally regulated? Can I feel safe enough? Can I feel connected enough that the attachment system turns off and then the exploration system turns on? It's very difficult to solve any exploration puzzles if the exploration system is off and the attachment system is engaged, because the attachment system is telling us to abandon exploration and seek proximity to somebody who will help us come back into emotional balance and into a sense of safety. So that's the first thing. Then once the attachment system is disengaged and the exploration system is active, we're going to move into this place that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk of activating the creative self activity, the thing that has curiosity, the thing that has interest, and to allow that interest to flow into the activities that have meaning. And here is really where we're going to encounter this wall of fear and need to begin to explore what it is that's fearful, which is really a kind of representation of the early experiences of that natural expression of primary exploration and what you experience in that. In avoidant people, the expectation is rejection. And so what really matters is always kept secret so that rejection doesn't happen. It doesn't taint that primary drive. But remember, in that cycle of exploration, there's the going out and discovering, and there's the returning and expressing it. And so you have to be able to overcome that fearfulness, that anticipation of rejection and sadness in expressing the thing that you discover, which is quite a vulnerable place. So we need to get into a place where the people around us make us feel safe enough that we're willing to be vulnerable in that way. With the preoccupied conditioning, Mudit?
Sorry, I was going to ask for an example. Why is it, what is this exploration? It's simple. Why is the just fear in coming back and expressing it? What's a rejection from that somebody will not like what I found out in the exploration?
That because avoidant people are quite rigid in terms of their worldview and presentation of things, that if you were to share with somebody something that was of such primary importance to you, and they would belittle it, it would be devastating.
So be little, okay.
That your choice of the thing that means so much to you is not worth it, which is actually just a repetition of what the early experience was like. So not only do you have the momentary experience of rejection, but you have the whole lifetime of sadness dumping onto it. So it becomes an overwhelming experience. And what you'll notice in avoidant people is if they open up and are a little bit vulnerable and you don't respond in a good way, they immediately withdraw and they never forget. They never forgive it. And one of the things that also is true, because they tend to get into relationships with preoccupied people, if they do open up to a preoccupied person, it's nearly impossible for a preoccupied person not to poke them for being vulnerable, which just completely shuts them down.
Interesting. Poke them as in taunt?
Yes.
Like you're being too vulnerable? Like
Yes.
literally that comment?
Or that's ridiculous. It means nothing. Which then of course shuts all of that down for the dismissing person. Now, what does the dismissing person get out of that? It reinforces the fact that they can never share the stuff that's the most personal to them. So they never have to make the attempt to do it, which means they never have to risk touching into the terrible sadness in the expression. So it actually works for them. I think it's one of the reasons why it's so common.
Sorry, it works for them as in keeping it secret works for them.
Yeah.
Right.
It reinforces their understanding that keeping it secret is the right way to go. But what they miss from that is the entrance into collaborative relationships, because it really is one of the requirements of collaborative relationships that you're able to express this stuff fully. Preoccupied people, of course, don't explore very well. And so they're always looking for reinforcement and not having to, because to approach the fearfulness for them is really challenging. So and because preoccupied people tend to be hyperactivating of the attachment system and hypoactivating of the exploration system, in order for them to actually connect and settle that fearfulness to get the exploration system to turn on, is a whole reorienting of the way that they operate in the world. Once they do that, of course, then they're completely inexperienced in exploring, and really are lacking basic knowledge of what's meaningful to them and what isn't meaningful to them. The good news about that is, of course, that the whole world is open to them and they can try anything from the point of view, is this meaningful to me, because they've tried so little. But it is then also, in some sense, catching up on a lifetime of not having made those discernments, so really having no direction to go to. So it seems daunting. And because they're not used to engaging in regulating relationships, really, where they are able to regulate themselves, there's that whole piece of developing the capacity to emotionally regulate that will allow them to go out into the world regulated. And then also have that secure base to fall back on when they get dysregulated at the end. So the fearfulness for them is that habit of life, that conditioned life of finding problems and seeking continuous proximity to somebody they find regulating, and really having very little capacity to regulate themselves independent of someone else, which means in order to do exploration, they almost need to go with somebody and do it more as a pair or a small group than on their own, which means the quality of the exploration is often compromised, because the unique quality of the individuals in the group are not satisfied in a single direction of exploration. Disorganized people, because so often the means of exploration are the thing that is used to exploit them, they have a really hard time relying on someone else for emotional regulation. They're really used to withdrawing and regulating independently. Udit?
So George, I didn't understand the fearful aspect of the preoccupied. What is the fear about? Of
the fearfulness of the preoccupied person is that they don't regulate themselves emotionally well, so that they have a hard time separating from the proximity of their emotional regulator in order to go explore in the first place. They have very little experience in exploring and very little discernment about what to explore. And so very little skill in how to make the determination. And so any aspect of exploration really can produce a sense of fearfulness.
Why exploration causes fearfulness? The separation should cause fearfulness.
It does. So you separate, and there you are standing on the sidewalk. What do you do now?
helplessness was more, yeah.
Do I go right or left? Do I go straight ahead? What if I get it wrong? I mean, that comes from that lack of experience of exploration. There, one of the things that you notice about people that are good at exploring is that they take in the data, they make sense of it, they formulate an intention for an action, they take the action, and then they gather what happens, make another assessment about it, form another plan of action, take another action, and they gather the data of what happened, and then continue to do that in an easy cycle. But when you don't know that you're supposed to gather the data, you don't know that you're supposed to analyze it, and it's supposed to cause you to choose a direction, that becomes quite labored. And then you're fearful if you make the wrong decision and you take an action, that you'll have to make another action and have to make another discernment of what to do. And so and because preoccupied people do not monitor very well, it's very hard for them to connect. I took this action and I had this result. How do I take another action that's going to give me a better result? Or am I simply going to take another action and get another result and not really be able to understand how I want to navigate what's happening? And so part of that is developing that capacity to monitor, and then that capacity to discern how to adjust your responses to things so that you can get a better outcome for what you want when you don't know what you want. So that creates a sense of fearfulness, which can be paralyzing.
Mm.
And then you take a disorganized person, the fearfulness there is that if I make the wrong decision, I'm going to put myself in a position with a perpetrator where they're going to harm me again. So I have to make the perfect choice where I'm not going to be harmed by the outcome of this. So that notches the fearfulness up to a whole nother level of if I make the wrong decision, I won't survive it. How do you make fluid choices and keep maneuvering through the process of exploration when every decision is life or death? So that's where that gets tight.
There's one more thing I need to ask is the exploration piece. The actual exploration, you say, can be anything. There's so many options, so many possibilities. Right. It's not clear to me what can, because I was thinking about the people in the gym. Can a person who goes to the gym be really fascinated about his self-image, in the sense he loves to exercise?
Right.
Can that be an exploration? Or a person loves to read. There is no particular output in these cases. Maybe there is in the exercise piece, but a person is obsessed with it looking perfect. But he loves it. He loves going to the gym, spends hours every day.
And then you'd have to really look at the motivation for that and whether it's organized around a primary exploration or whether it's around a secondary exploration.
I see motivation. So what's the motivation of going to the gym then?
Lots of them. Let's say you were abused as a child, and so you go to the gym so that you'll be so powerful that nobody could ever abuse you again. That would not be primary exploration. That would be stuck in the past. You go to the gym because you want to look beautiful so that you can get access to people that you find beautiful. So that would be secondary, right? Because the activity itself is not the purpose of it. The exploration itself is not the purpose of it. So you go to the gym and you work out furiously because rock climbing is the thing that just sends you, and you want to go to these beautiful places and climb the rock, and the activity of climbing the rock is the thing that really connects you spiritually to everything. And then that becomes a primary exploration. But it could look similarly in terms of the activities.
Gotcha. And what about reading or other things that does not produce any output?
Well, I think that that's part of culturally, we have this idea that creativity should necessarily produce a tangible outcome, but that actually isn't true, I don't think. Or that the outcome is something that we culturally value, which I also don't. That's one of my biggest gripes about the system that we live in, that the there is such a narrow band. And one of the things that actually terrifies me about AI is how seamlessly they're compressing what's allowable in our society, what information is allowable in our society. They can really just exclude massive amounts of stuff. We're more and more reliant on the internet. We're more and more reliant on these search engines and these AI engines to gather the information that we want. And they're just ratcheting down the controls more and more of what's allowable in that frame. And so it simply never appears in the search. And if you don't have some awareness of it existing outside of that, then you think that that little slice, it's really getting down to a tiny little slice of what's out there, is all that's out there. And they can really control the themes and the narratives in pretty much any way that it serves their purpose. And there simply is no alternative, really, at a certain point.
I think meaning is such a big word in this case. I mean, you don't say you feel good when you do something. That's enough, because from from this Dzogchen point of view, there is no particular meaning. The view of these.
That's quite different.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
There's no intrinsic meaning. That's true. So if you talk about it, so in the colloquial definition of nihilism, right? Nothing matters because nothing has meaning. That's wrong. That's a misunderstanding of it. There is no intrinsic meaning in anything. You provide the meaning for everything, right? But that doesn't mean it doesn't mean something to you. That doesn't mean it isn't important.
Self, yes, but not to life, not to.
Yes, not because
life.
The universe has organized itself around what's meaningful and what isn't.
Right, exactly. Universe doesn't have any purpose itself, right?
Yes, which frees you in a way to go after whatever it is that you find meaningful, because there is no inherent hierarchy of meaning, except in our culture, we assign that and we reinforce it in a lot of different ways. And we just compacted and compacted and compacted. So all of the resources flow into this extremely narrow band of things that are valued, and all the rest of it is not.
Is there an emotional response to the meaning, the word meaning? Do you say when you refer to this is meaningful? And if you translate that to emotions, is there particular emotions you think of?
Well, in the Buddhist thought, emotions are neutral, so anything could be meaningful. If your relationship to them is afflictive, then any emotion can take on an afflictive quality. Any emotion can take on a beneficial quality. And I'm also an artist, so the main source of meaning in my life is these artistic expressions that I make. But just because I make them doesn't mean that they have resonance far and wide. They don't tend to represent the narrow range of cultural value so much, and so tend to think of them as not not created to be resident in that way, and deal with the ambivalence of that.
Or no impact on anybody else. It doesn't really
Right.
mean to your meaning.
That isn't actually, yeah, the purpose of it is not for that necessarily. There needs to be, I think, in all of these expressions, all of these avenues of exploration, an expression of the exploration that you engage in. And that could be simply to the group of people that are around you, that safety net that you develop, but it's an essential aspect of it. Otherwise, it tends to slip into the auto-regulating side of things, where the activity actually is just a regulating activity that allows you to withdraw from the engagement of life.
So then reading that then will be auto-regulating in that case. Reading will not be, because there's an expression of it.
Well, how then, when you read, do you make an expression of it? So around here, everybody, it's a reading culture around here. So everybody's reading something or other, and that enlivens the discussions of ideas between people. And then the discussions take on a very meaningful quality in the sense of connection and understanding of what's happening.
It's like a kid could be consuming information. Any information could be enlivening and meaningful because I read the newspaper and that lets me have
Right. Exactly.
some with other people. Okay.
I think we should do a little meditation, and we can continue this conversation next week. We haven't quite completed the topic. All right, let go of the meditation. So we have a few things starting soon. One is a level 2 class on Friday mornings, the first and third Friday. It's from 10:30 to 12:30 a.m. Pacific time. And then on the 16th, we have the first of our series of two, sorry, on the 21st, we have the 21st of September, which is a Saturday, we have the first in our series of two half-day workshops on exploration. We're going to focus mainly on primary and secondary exploration on the class in September. And in October, we'll focus on activating the creative sense of self for artistic expression, if that's something that's interesting to you. That's what's happening. If you're interested, it's all of that information is on the website. I offer the teaching freely, but I do hope that if you're able to support us, you will. There's a link for donation on the website. It helps support me and also the work Mettagroup is doing. Really appreciate it. Any amount is valued. And of course, if you're not resourced yet, please feel free to attend. Thank you, and I will see you soon. Bye.